Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host, Q, coming to you once again from my mother's basement. And we have a very special Bitcoin Magazine Live in store for you today. We're going to have news and notes at the end of today's episode after our interview with Joe Carlasare and Jimmy Song. But right now, we are joined by none other than Specific Mills for a breaking news update. Mills, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What a wonderful day.
For those who maybe aren't really catching on to the title, to the thumbnail, what are we talking about today?
Today, the judge, Helen, in Norway, officially awarded the verdict for the Hodlonaut versus Craig Wright case, which we were covering for 7 days in September. And it was a very sweeping verdict. We can go through, some of the specifics, but the claim, the general claim for Craig Wright, which is and the verdict is like 26 pages in Norwegian. So I'm basing this off of the translation, but Craig Wright's claim was that Hodlonaut statements were defamatory and an invasion of privacy, and that they were unlawful, and that they impacted Craig Wright's professional and personal sense of honor and reputation. So defamation and libel. And as we've explained, the case for the judge to make the ruling on whether or not that claim holds is based on the judge's ruling whether Hodlonaut was wrong in saying that. So that would imply the closest ruling that we've had to saying that Craig Wright is not Satoshi. So the judge had to make a judgment assessment based on all of the evidence, all of the witnesses, the statements from both lawyers, whether or not Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto, for her to then assess the 9 tweets in question in this case, the libel defamation tweets, whether they were unlawful and not protected under Norwegian free speech.
And so this is really exciting. I know we spent a lot of time discussing this story and see this trial finally come to a decision. I guess my next question for you, Mills, is just sort of what does this mean? What are the next steps, and where do we go from here?
It'll be interesting to see how this ruling will impact the current case, ongoing case in the UK, because the UK case is about 1 tweet specifically, and the Norwegian case is about 9. There was a lot of motion to try to get the case in the UK dismissed as it was redundant, but because they had changed the scope, to my understanding, to make it a different number of tweets, basically, so that it wasn't an identical case as the one in Norway. So that the next proceedings for that UK case have been scheduled for December. It'll be very interesting to see how this ruling will impact that case. I don't know. I mean, obviously, this is amazing news for Hodlonaut. This is a very definitive, the court said they have concluded that Hodlonaut's statements are not unlawful, and there is no responsibility for the statements that he made in a legal sense, and meaning financial and non-financial damages, regardless of where the damage occurred. And there is a lot of breaking down specifically how the judge reached this verdict in the statement. And it talks a lot about the general consensus, other publications, articles that have been published citing a lot of 2015 and 2016, saying it isn't actually that this is specifically Hodlonaut's opinion, and that there is actually a good deal of consensus within other publications as well. So that, not that that was, the cause for, but it was reinforcing that these statements were kind of in keeping with a lot of general thought and general consensus. And one thing, because this is not a criminal case, this did not have to be proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. It had to be likely That was the, so it had to be likely and probable. And so based on all the evidence that was presented, all of the testimonies, the general consensus of media publications and a lot of other individuals as well, the court ruled that it is widely held belief and not a specific smear campaign or targeted attack by Hodlonaut onto Craig Wright.
This is all really exciting, and we're really glad to sort of see this justice come to light and see the court see this decision. I think we want to. I'm going to pull Hodlonaut up now because we actually have the man we are discussing now. Hodlonaut, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. You must be so relieved and so excited hearing this court's decision.
Hey guys, yeah, very happy, I think is the correct way to describe my feelings right now. I'm just really happy that all this work, all this time, all this conviction in standing by truth has actually been recognized by the court in a good judgment, I think. I mean, you could always dream of even more spelled out verdicts, but I think there is a lot in this judgment that it creates a momentum that I think will be very hard to turn around for the future legal happenings regarding Craig Wright being Satoshi.
I saw, and Mills, apologies if you brought this up during my technical issues, the court actually, or the judge wrote in her decision how there was not enough, if I'm remembering this phrase, there was not enough evidence to prove that Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto. Is that the accurate way?
Well, you said it wrong. Sorry. There wasn't sufficient evidence for Craig Wright to prove that he is Satoshi Nakamoto.
Thank you. And can we just discuss, like, on the topic of the momentum that this carries, like, how impactful does that become for future cases? Because this is Hodlonaut. You are just unfortunately one notch in Craig's belt. I believe, Chris, we have a document of all of the different court cases that are coming up as well of Craig Wright that he has. Yes, cool. Mills, do you mind explaining to our audience a little bit, like, what exactly are we looking at? What is this supposed to be showing them, and who is documenting all of this?
Yeah, there's actually Arthur Van Pelt has a different document as well in there. Sorry, Chris, I'm not sure if you can find that. It kind of has the status on the various cases that have happened, both in the past, that are ongoing, that are open, and that are, because this is not, as much as, we've been very focused in on this specific case, on Hodlonaut versus Craig Wright in Oslo case. There are cases against developers. There are a lot of cases that are happening that, haven't had as much talk about them and not as much awareness. But there is and I can find the link to and we can share it. There is a good document that Arthur Van Pelt has done, kind of highlighting and breaking down what each of the cases are. And I know we've said it a million times, but Hodlonaut also has a UK case with Craig currently that the next step is scheduled for December. There hasn't been any update, or is there anything as far as that case that is directly impacted, or is that too soon to know?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
The UK hearing scheduled for December, do you anticipate this ruling will affect that in the near future, or is it too early to kind of speculate?
I obviously need to discuss that in detail with my lawyers. They have not had the time to, go through this judgment in deep detail and how it will affect the UK situation. But in general, I mean, winning as solidly as I did today with the quotes from the judge about, I mean, the judgment, for example, says that, or it declares that I had the reason to make the allegations I did back in 2019. Of course, it will affect the UK, but to what degree and how, it's too early to say, and something we will need to dive into in the coming weeks and months.
And, as you sort of progress forward and deal with the next headache in front of you, Hodlonaut, do you have any thoughts you want to share just about, this trial, the Oslo trial now being behind you and the decision coming through? I'm sure you must have a real great sigh of relief seeing and the feelings you and your family have right now.
Yeah, it's an it's an enormous relief. Of course, my stance before this judgment was that I was already happy because I knew that we had done well in the trial. I had spoken my simple truth. We presented years of very solid work documenting our case and documenting why Craig is not Satoshi Nakamoto. So all the things that were within my control, I was very happy with how it played out. And now even stuff that was outside my control, which is how the judge actually ruled, also happened in my favor. So it's amazing. And I'm very optimistic on the road forward, and I'm very motivated to, keep at it until all of this has gone away conclusively. So big relief, I feel, also a renewed sense of thankfulness for all the support I have gotten. I'm thankful that we have a working court system in Norway. I think the judgment was very solid. I respect the judge for the way she followed the trial. She was so turned on the whole time. And I think this judgment just underlines that she was not bamboozled by anything. The judge knows exactly what's up here.
And were you surprised at all at the way, those who maybe agree with Craig Wright's claims both handled themselves during the case as well as currently? Has there been any more difficulties or any pushback from that crowd?
I mean, of course, there have been DMs and different types of attempted harassment. It doesn't really register much. I don't respect these people at all. I would say, I don't expect much from people who support Craig at this point. So anything they say and do registers very little with me.
And I want to, really emphasize a point, especially for the new audience members, people who are just tuning in and have no idea who Craig Wright is. If you do, bless you for not knowing the headache of Craig Wright. But as we all know, Satoshi remained anonymous for good reason. And the importance of maintaining that anonymity goes far deeper than just being able to secure a very large amount of Bitcoin held up in some wallet somewhere. Mills, Hodlonaut, do you mind just really emphasizing to some of our newer audience members, like what the importance of this case means just for the Bitcoin community as a whole, as well as Bitcoin itself?
For me personally, I would say it's mostly a matter of not letting yourself be bullied, not backing down on something you believe in, like trusting that sticking to your principles and sticking to truth will get you through a situation, even if there are a lot of unknowns. That's for me personally the big one here, because I certainly did not want to end up in this situation. It happened by chance. But when it happened by chance, I'm just so happy that I managed to, walk the walk on on the stuff that I believe is important. And in the larger picture regarding Bitcoin, I think Wright certainly has an expiry date, regardless of my cases. But it's really important that we as a community manage to pull together at certain times when we are confronted with people or processes that threaten the ethos of Bitcoin or threatens members of this community. And I think this community has really stepped up in this case, which is why I register myself that I'm probably a broken record, like always saying that I'm so thankful for the support, but there's a reason I'm saying it, and that's that the community really has stepped up and come together around me in this case.
I mean,
I think to that point too, what has happened defending BTC, came through this case, but it stands for something so much bigger as well with the OpenSats Legal Defense Fund. So it's not just for this case. It might have gotten the attention through this case, but it stands to continue to protect the truth. And that's, that is a legacy, and that is, to your point, Hodlonaut, the community really coming together. And it's not just this specific instance, it's to protect other people that might find themselves in similar situations for, similar behavior.
Yeah, I think this property of Bitcoin and Bitcoiners is, it becomes apparent again and again. And it really is clear that if you come into this space and starts messing or fucking with the principals or the members, there you will meet some opposition. There will be some consequences. You can't just do that in this space. Even the decentralized entity that is the spirit of Bitcoin will get annoyed and will come together to take you out.
There was a lot of talk in court from the opposition about the toxicity within the Bitcoin community. And in some ways, there is a real beautiful side to that of being willing to speak up, being willing to, I'm not saying all toxic behavior is with good intentions, but there is a bravery that was very cited. And I feel like Hodlonaut's lawyers were very my hat is off to them in the way that they were able to understand Bitcoin and Bitcoin culture to the degree that then they could explain to the judge. And there is an understanding, I think, on some level of that this is a community. This is, a virtual, even though there is no such thing maybe as Bitcoin community, it's pockets of people that are like-minded or that are choosing to stand for something. But I think that really did come out throughout the court case as well.
Yeah, I was out with my lawyers like less than a week ago, actually, to kind of have a few beers and debrief the trial. We did not expect the verdict or the judgment to come in this quickly. We were kind of looking at November 8th or even later, possibly. But what I can say is that my lawyers, they have, I think it was pretty clear that they are very intrigued and fascinated and I think impressed with the Bitcoin community. And there is some orange pilling happening there, and which is kind of expected whenever people are exposed enough to Bitcoin. They will kind of pick it up. So that was cool to see.
Is there, and this is an honest question, is there any chance that there can be an appeal for this ruling? That
I was about to ask the same thing. I was like, excuse the ignorant Americans here, but
yeah. Craig and Calvin has already announced it on Twitter that they will definitely appeal, and I don't doubt that they will. I don't think that's going to end well. We, as you may know, we tried to get at least one witness in mid-trial because Dustin Trammell had a couple of points to take up with Craig regarding what he said in his testimony. And there was more than one thing in Craig's testimony that, that we would like to revisit if there is an appeal, which will be nice. And I think in Norway, as far as I understand, it's almost automatic that you will be granted an appeal if you want it. So I have to be prepared that there will actually be an appeal. But at this moment, it doesn't matter to me at all. I won this fucking thing conclusively. I won on all counts. The footage of the trial is out there for everyone to see. Basically, come at me, Craig. Appeal, do whatever you want to do. You're gonna lose.
And I mean, I can't say something that bold, and it's amazing to hear it. But
I fucking love you, Hodlonaut, man. I want to get really quickly, Hodlonaut. I want to give you the opportunity to just speak directly to just the entire community. I know you've said how thankful you are, and you've said it. But if you wanted to just speak directly, not to Mills or I, but just to the community out there who has followed along and supported you in any way they could.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks a lot from the bottom of my heart. It's these last 3 years have been, I think, transformative for me. I'm exactly the same person I was 3 years ago, but I've proven things to myself that I still hadn't proven back then. And all this support is part of the reason why I've been able to prove it. So I will never forget these years, and I notice, even if I don't have time to answer all these comments of support, I notice them, and I really appreciate everything of it. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's been kind of a wild, there's been so much support even behind your back in a good way, Hodlonaut, of just, so much of the community, even at Bitcoin Amsterdam, so many people spoke with me about the trial and, have been so invested in this. And in many ways, it's almost, no, you didn't choose this, to be something you're very known for, but this has become such a big thing and you've handled it so well. And there's just so much respect in the community for your character and your consistency. And this has been a very long process. It started over 3 years ago. And one thing that really stood out to me about, we did a couple interviews before court, after court, but the way in which you took it all very seriously, not just for yourself, but really for truth. And you said something to the effect that you didn't have to study up or memorize, what your statement would be. You had to tell the truth on the stand. And that level of character and integrity, I think, is something that just really stands out and has been really amazing to be able to be involved. And I know being able to help spread, putting the footage of testimonies and witnesses and being able to share the court, this was such a team effort. And there have been so many people that have supported and made this all possible. And it's just the community is really, truly wonderful. And I'm excited to kind of see if this can shift some of the momentum. I know there's a lot of ongoing cases as well, but this has been such a monumental win. So I'm happy you're focused on the win and not the future and appeal and whatever.
Yeah. If I'm not gonna enjoy the win right now, then when the hell am I gonna enjoy myself? So I'm totally gonna suck on this caramel for quite a few days and just, uh, be proud of myself and be proud of Bitcoin and proud of you guys and proud of everyone who came together to help me get this result.
And best case scenario, you don't have to apply for any of the OpenSats legal defense, and it can go to other cases. I mean, that's another. It's not like this, you just won a bunch of money in the lottery that you can go retire now. This is all of the Bitcoin and fiat that was raised is, has to be by the OpenSats legal defense fund, and that's something that anyone that's going through cases like this can apply for this grant. And this, hopefully, I mean, as the verdict says, all of the legal expenses are covered by Craig Wright in what the judge handed down. I don't know if that could change in the appeal or anything, but as of now, it's a complete win.
Absolutely. It's important to note that, I mean, Craig has now been part of this judgment was that he now has to pay, what was it, like $400,000.
Yeah.
He already owes me money from a previous judgment on him having to pay me. That was like $60,000, I think. But both the money that Craig now will have to pay me and the OpenSats funds, none of this money is like gonna go into my pocket in any way. I've been lucky enough to have support before this fundraiser as well. So, it's not like I'm celebrating suddenly having $400,000 between my hands or anything. Because, I mean, I'm not even sure if he's gonna pay it, to be honest. I mean, he doesn't have a great track record of settling his debts, so we'll see.
Maybe he'll send you some BSV.
Yeah, maybe I will get $5,000 bounty or something. Who knows? Yeah, I'm really happy that money has been raised for this legal fund. Now I will start looking at how to deal with the UK proceedings, which unfortunately still is a thing. And if we manage to get all of this bullshit dealt with, and there is still money in the OpenSats fund, that's just amazing, because I'm sure this is not the last time deep pockets will try to mess with Bitcoiners.
Mills, could you just walk our audience, especially those who came in late? I know Hodlonaut alluded to the UK trial coming up. Can you just help our audience? What exactly did the Oslo trial find and decide, and what is sort of the UK trial, what is being determined there?
The Oslo case was over 9 tweets from 2019, and it was actually a case initiated by Hodlonaut in response to the initial reach out from Craig Wright. And the case in Norway for the judge to make that ruling of whether it was libel or defamation, these 9 tweets in question, had to have a base understanding whether or not what Hodlonaut was saying was true. And the accusations and the defamation in question and libel was that Craig Wright is a fraud. And so the judge had to come to a fundamental decision whether what Hodlonaut was saying was defamation or whether that was actually a consensual agreement. And that's the verdict that she found, was that he was not the only one saying this, that this had been very well backed up and is the general opinion held.
Yeah, she basically ruled that I had good grounds for making the tweets I did. But the UK case, it's the same case. It's the
but it's only
reason...
one tweet.
Yeah, exactly, and that's part of why they managed to like technically bamboozle the UK judges into. I mean, it was first thrown out, and then they managed on an appeal to make it stand there, which is very unfortunate. But of course, it's the same case. It's about a tweet where I say that Craig is not Satoshi, and yeah, it's very stupid. I still have hope that we will manage to deal with this UK situation in a sane manner, but if it goes to a full trial in the UK too, then so be it.
Has anyone said like one small step for a space cap, one giant leap for Bitcoin kind? Has anyone done that yet?
Maybe in a slightly different flavor. At least I've been thinking it that this was a big step today, like a huge step, and it was. I didn't expect the judgment this early, so I was kind of surprised yesterday when I suddenly got an email from my lawyer saying the judgment is coming tomorrow. So I was very eager to know the result, and I was aware of kind of how big of a deal it is. It was a huge deal. So super happy, and proud of seeing I don't know, just truth winning over something that is very far from truth.
Guys, I'm having an absolute ball talking to the two of you, but I do have Jimmy Song and Joe Carlasare in the green room right now. Hodlonaut, I will give you the final word to wrap up here. Any final thoughts that you want to share? If you wanted to just say FCSW, you have a mic.
I'm not going to say that, but I'll leave it up to the audience to speculate on what I may be thinking inside my head. But what I will say is I'm sharing a bottle of bubbly water with my family right now, and I invite everyone who has supported me or is happy about the judgment today to have a glass to celebrate with me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Hodlonaut. Thank you, Mills, for joining us. We're going to cut to a commercial break, but before we do that, I do want to remind everyone that tickets for Bitcoin 2023 are available now. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off of those. Ticket prices will be going up soon. This event will happen in Miami, May 18th to the 20th. We will be back with Joe Carlasare and Jimmy Song after this commercial break.
You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. You are listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Listening to Bitcoin Magazine Live. Number one Bitcoin Magazine Live. Sama.
Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks, and I am excited to introduce our guest today, the first being a Bitcoin expert, open source coder, and author of 4 different Bitcoin books, Jimmy Song, as well as commercial litigator supporting Bitcoin and co-host of the Inside Bitcoin podcast, Joe Carlasare. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Oh, and of course, P is here. Hey, guys.
How's it going?
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Incredibly glad to have you.
Going well.
Jimmy. Oh, you're muted, Jimmy. We can't hear you. And you're incredibly backlit. You look like you're kind of like in a CIA informant video where they're going to have you on a voice distorter.
Still muted.
We still can't hear you. And you took
He
your
took
hat
off the
for us.
hat. He took off the hat to hope it would unmute him. That would be great.
Holy shit. Okay. While we figure out Jimmy's microphone, I have a brief story to tell, which is when we were at Bitcoin 2022, Jimmy Song was on the news desk. And I walked by, or I scooted by, because I was on this little like zippy electric scooter. And, because I was doing all the programming. And I saw this person and I was like, who is that handsome man shilling knowledge? And of course, it was Jimmy Song without his hat. And I had no idea who it was, because without that hat.
All right,
Could
can
be
you
anything.
guys hear me now?
Yes.
There he
Yes, we
is.
can.
All right, that's better. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that, guys. Also, I apologize for the poor lighting. I am traveling, and I don't have my usual studio with me, and I won't for a while. So, I mean, my normal lighting. Actually, you know what? There is a lamp here. Maybe I can use one of these. And
Yes, that lamp worked.
all
No,
let's
Jimmy, I
see.
was just saying, I'm into it. Oh,
Mhm.
nice. That actually did work.
All right, there we go. All right, how's that?
Beautiful. You look good.
Okay. All
Gentlemen,
right, good to see you
I,
guys.
I appreciate you both taking the time to join us. When P and I were discussing what to talk to you guys about yesterday, it seemed like everyone had gone on vacation. There was no news stories going on. And then we wake up this morning to the IRS trying to slip a little something by everyone, and Liz Truss stepping down in the UK. All at the same time, another block has come by and Bitcoin continues to chug along. My first question, I want to talk the topic of the UK because they have been in the news every single week. Joe, does Liz Truss stepping down have as much of an impact as I'd like to think it will?
It's certainly going to have an impact. I think it just speaks to the fact of how dysfunctional and how much of a mess they're in, both fiscally and monetarily. And, for my part, it just shows that nobody is willing to sit in that chair long enough to do what is really right. And it's like a revolving door at this point. So hopefully, I always try to be an optimist. I hope that, maybe it'll be of cause to put in place somebody who's going to be willing to do the hard things, which is fiscal and monetary discipline over there to get things in order. But, that's going to take pain, and people don't like pain, which is unfortunate. But I guess they've delayed it for as long as can be at this point over there.
Can we just give a brief description of what exactly happened in the UK? Like who Liz Truss is, what the timeline was, and why this is a significant event?
Looking for me to do that?
You absolutely can. Q can. Whoever, Jimmy, you can jump into. Whoever feels the most passionate about this topic.
Why don't you go ahead, Q?
I'm just going to give an overview really quickly of about 2 months ago, Boris Johnson, rumors started to swirl that Boris Johnson was going to be forced out. Essentially, the Conservative Party their leadership started to step back and say, we no longer support Boris Johnson, in which time he essentially stepped down as prime minister. Because the Conservative Party in the UK still holds parliament, they get to select whoever is prime minister next. They had a runoff election that was not voted on by the public, but rather voted on by the parliament members themselves. Liz Truss ended up winning this election about 45 days ago, was instituted as prime minister. And during her tenure, decisions or policies that were introduced included a tax cut for the rich that sent the pound almost at parity with the dollar. Quantitative easing was reintroduced, only to then have tightening brought back on the table, and then easing was reintroduced and tightening was once again brought back on the table. All at the same time, last week we saw the British, I believe it was the 30-year bonds, correct me if I'm wrong there, Joe.
Yes, the 30.
Crossed above 5%, signaling that there is almost no liquidity in that market, that there are no buyers, and that interest rates continue to push higher and higher. It wasn't
also that weird episode where there was a communication basically to the pensions. You have 3 days to figure this out, which was totally bizarre. Get it done somehow. And of course they can't, because you can't unwind positions that big in such a short amount of time.
So for me, I see this as one of the most clueless financial policy initiators, if you will, just finally saying, hey, everything I do is wrong, so I'm going to step away. And it's not as rosy as I make it seem, but in no span during the last 6 weeks has, in my opinion, Liz Truss presented something or done something for their financial policies that was like, oh, that's a good idea. That's what you should do next. It seemed like it was a lot of entitlements, a lot of bailouts being introduced, a lot of tax cuts. This seems pretty antithetical to, Joe, to your point, like the pain that we want to see policymakers be willing to live with based on their decisions. To your point, though, like we'll see if someone gets put into a position to actually make those decisions. I know that based on UK law, they shout out BTC Gandalf, who like walked me through all of this morning. The Conservative Party is just once again going to vote on their new choice for prime minister. So if
I think Boris Johnson's in the mix too. To come, he's back.
Okay, so I'm just saying, if Boris Johnson does become prime minister again, Donald Trump will become president in 2024. Like that's the circular loop that we are.
It's the circle
on.
of life, the circle of political life. Jimmy, I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about sort of the way that the fiat system corrupts what should be a much more just and reasonable system. I'm curious if you have thoughts here related to this specific topic.
Well, I mean, Great Britain, UK, they're just a complete mess. And, you got to realize it's been like 400 years of their central bank sort of like ruling over all kinds of things all over the world. And it's been a very, very long time. And, their pound has, even like 100 years ago, it was $5 to a pound or something close to that. I mean, you're now looking at parity as like a realistic thing coming up in the next 6 months. I mean, this is crazy. And, the devaluation of their currency sort of indicates their place in the world. And, if you look at history over the last 100 years or so, 120 years, they've been an empire that's been on the way down. And if you look at the UK, what I see is the US's future, because the US is not going to hold this mantle that long either. And the UK has, tried very desperately to hold on. And they're still a financial hub for a reason. And part of that is because of their colonial history and the empire that they once had. But, it's all kind of coming home to roost. I think it was Margaret Thatcher that said that, at some point you run out of other people's money to spend, and that they're very much at that point. They don't have colonies anymore. This is 50 years of ridiculousness coming home to roost. And in a way, it's kind of appropriate because there was this monarch that was there for like 70 something years, and then she dies, and it's all about to fall apart. And
yeah,
it's what can I say? They are the epitome of a fiat government, fiat system, and they've been running it longer than anybody. And it's no wonder that they have like so many socialist policies, so many stupid policies, and it's coming back to bite them. And they're finally having to pay the piper. What can I say?
Yeah. Two things real quick. That to Jimmy's point, it's interesting. He brought up the pound, and the pound sterling literally was a pound of silver, right? Like that's generally how it came about, which would be, in today's dollars, like, $2,000, $3,000 approximately, which is amazing, right? Shows you that how it's been debased. But interestingly enough, my takeaway from watching this all is not only in the UK, but also in Central Europe, Southern Europe, you see the fact that this hiking policy that's in place by the Fed is really disproportionately affecting the weaker players on the global scene, right? It is affecting the countries that don't have the privilege of the dollar. They're breaking first, right? Which is why the DXY continues to rage, and there's this global demand for dollars. So that's fascinating to me that, from our perspective, the countries out there that are really struggling are, we're so US focused mostly. It might be emerging markets. It might be, the Southern Europe, Italy, Germany, the UK. Those might be the first pillars to sort of really struggle.
I think, Joe, you bring up such an excellent point, though, because like while we're talking about the UK, like this happened in Italy, 3 months ago. This is going on all over the world in different ways. We saw the crisis in Sri Lanka back in May. We're seeing uprisings in Iran against the regime, against these powers that be. The general theme that I'm sort of connecting all these dots is that people are fed up with the decision makers and the decisions that they have been making. My question, however, is where do we
Including
go?
the UN, by the way, Q, including the UN, who's literally like, hey, guys, stop raising rates. You're breaking the system apart and you're going to hurt the developing world.
I mean,
Wait, who's the UN saying that to?
The UN
Yeah.
literally put out sort of this, go Google it, P, about this UN recommendation that they slow these rate hikes because it's putting too much pressure on emerging markets, which is amazing, right? Like the UN, say what you will about them, but I don't recall ever them commenting on monetary policy. That seems really strange, right? That they're saying literally, you guys got to slow down the hikes.
Well, Joe,
mean,
the joke about what's secretly going on behind closed doors is it's not just the UN asking that. It was the UN, the IMF, the ECB, and they
Right.
all were doing it through the public media. And it felt like a signal saying, hey, Jay Powell, you're not picking up my phone call. So this is what we're trying to tell you. And we're just going to broadcast this to the whole world because you're not taking our phone call. And I mean, look, the US Federal Reserve has not said or announced any deviation from their current policy plans. Of course, by the time we hear about it, that'll be too late. They'll have already made those decisions and they'll have already stacked their bags accordingly. But I wonder if there is an opportunity for policy decisions to get made, or if this is really going to come down to a genuine revolution or a revolt of the people as we're starting to see it grow in places like Italy, in Eastern Europe, and throughout the Middle East.
Jimmy, any thoughts on that?
I'm trying to think of like how things play out, but the thing is, like, politics is always kind of a weird game to predict. I mean, you have people that cheat, you have people that sort of strong arm in situations like this. But what we are definitely going to see is more turmoil. And I mean, I'm in Europe right now, and I can definitely tell you that there's a lot of discontent. You know, I'm sure you guys have seen all the protests going on in Italy and in France and in Germany, all these places, like just huge crowds showing up and saying, you know, what the hell? Like, all the prices on everything are going up. And the thing is, like, for us in the US, we're feeling it kind of the least because the Fed is at least like hiking to like sort of keep inflation under control a little bit. Everywhere else in Europe, it's just, you know, I mean, they can't afford to, largely because of this crazy war thing and the, you know, energy crisis that they're about to enter in this winter. So you got a lot of different things coming to a head here, and you know, every government has been honestly pretty stupid about planning for the future, and this is part and parcel of a fiat mentality, is to, hey, let me just get through the next election. Who cares about, you know, what happens 30 years from now, or even 5-6 months from now when I'm not in office. That's what's happening, and a lot of these places are starting to wake up to the fact that these politicians are not paying attention at all to the long-term, you know, sort of consequences of a lot of their policies. And you know, I think in an environment like that, Bitcoin becomes a lot more attractive. But I mean, who knows? Like, it's difficult to predict like what's going to trigger it. I don't think anyone would have figured out in 2011 that, you know, a guy self-immolating in front of like you know, some judge's house or something like that in Morocco would set off the Arab Spring. It could be something like that. But what I can tell you is that there is popular discontent all over the world, and you know, even places like in East Asia, all the elections are going like, you know, all the liberal and far left parties are kind of losing, and I expect that to be a pattern because they're the ones that did the stupid green energy stuff that has, you know, essentially put Germany, France, and all these other places in an energy bind. You know, a lot of immigration stuff is a big deal in times like this. You know, you're going to see a lot of turmoil, and honestly, it had to happen because look at what we did since coronavirus. That was some of the most ridiculous thing that I could have ever. I don't think anyone could have predicted what's happened over the last 2 years, 2.5 years. So it's all coming home to roost. What can I say? And it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, to Jimmy's point, I'll just say, obviously Italy had their elections and the right-wing party swept and did incredibly well. But in addition to that, I was noticing this morning, one of the popular predictive websites for the elections coming up in the States, in America, predictit.org, there was a rapid move towards a Republican wave like this morning. I think it was like a 15-point bump for a Republican takeover of the Senate and the House. I don't know what really triggered that, but there seems to be some companion action in the betting market. So, you could be entering a very sort of a backlash period where people just say that's enough. We're fed up with it. And honestly, that's probably what it's going to take to get policymakers to really wake up. Unless they're really facing incredible pressure, they're going to continue to just kick the can down the road.
One thing I think is, I was going to say, I think we should talk about the fact that that the lifetime salary that is associated with her position. Do you want to speak to that?
Oh, the Liz Truss stuff?
Yes.
So apparently, and Liz is only going to be the 6th ever prime minister to receive this, but the prime minister gets paid £115,000 a year for the remainder of his or her life. Not a bad, I think, contractual stipulation, given you worked for 45 days and almost cratered your country's economy in just such a short window. Jimmy, I feel like this is the most fiat thing like ever invented. I'm going to caveat it. Like, US presidents get this as well. Like, Donald Trump gets this, George Bush, Bill Clinton, they all get this as well. I guess,
but I think
I know how you feel.
The short duration, like it's like, how long was she in office?
45 days. Yeah.
45 days, and then gets this amount of money for the rest of her life. That is insane. Also, I think
the thing that you're going to have to remember is that all of these numbers are going to look quaint in like 5 years when you have way more inflation, because this ain't stopping, guys. Last time we had something like this was the 70s, and it lasted like a whole decade. And that was, getting off the gold standard onto the petrodollar standard. I don't see how we avoid something like that for a while, because, every politician is going to want to spend more money to kick the can down the road. That means more money printing. You still have inflation going on. I don't see how this stops, because, you saw what happened in the UK. They had to print, or else their entire economy was going to go bust. So the only way to keep the grift going is to print more money. U.S. hasn't hit that point yet, but I can't see how it can avoid that, really. And the more pressure you have on with war and things like that, the more everyone's going to be tempted to go print. So the £120,000 or whatever, that's going to look like I don't know, $10,000 in like
it's going to be chump change.
Yeah, it's all going to be chump change, and it's those people that it hurts the most. All the pensioners and people like that thought they were set for life by negotiating these things in union contracts or whatever. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry, and I don't know how you get out of that, because imagine being a pensioner in like 1969 or something, right? Like. Good luck, like beating inflation over the 70s.
Well, I'll start with Joe. I'll give this question to you, and then same question to Jimmy. But say you guys had the opportunity to just get rid of one policy, one law in place, and in the U.S., what would it be and why?
That's an easy one. You need to have a sensible energy policy. As much as it would be great and utopian to move to this green energy policy, you need to recognize that the vast majority of the economy runs on carbon, and you need to figure out the ways to harness that and effectively and promote as much domestic production as possible. That, I think, is the number one thing you could do from an economic standpoint. Aside from that, our tax policy is just an absolute disaster. There's just, as someone who advises clients not on tax issues, but in the corporate setting, I can tell you that it's disproportionately harming middle class and lower class people the way the tax system is structured, and they need to fix it from top to bottom. It needs to be much more simpler. You need to cut out all of the loopholes that exist, and in my view, help perpetuate the fiat standard.
Jimmy, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and that set in motion a whole bunch of stuff. The other one I would say is the 16th Amendment, the one that allowed for an income tax. Before then, it was considered illegal, and I think it still should be. If you reverse the income tax, then you destroy a large apparatus of government. You have to make some insane amount of cuts. You get rid of a lot of rent seekers. They have to produce something useful instead of being middle managing bureaucrat rent seekers. So both of those would be fine with me. But the thing is, like, neither of that is going to happen anytime soon. And the reason is because everything is entrenched, and the people that are sort of like run the deep state and things like that, they're not going to let any of that happen. I mean, like, there are members of Congress that have been trying for many years to audit the Fed. They can't even get anywhere. They don't know. They don't even know who owns the Fed, right? Like it's not the federal government. It's these consortium of banks. We don't know exactly who gets the 6% dividends or whatever that they get paid at. We have no idea. And it's probably the Morgans. It's probably the Rockefellers. Like this all shadows stuff
Rothschilds.
that nobody can find out anything about because it's all buried underneath everything. And according to Ron Paul's advisors, when his staff went around the Congress like asking, okay, like, can you tell us who does it? It was considered impolite or like committing a faux pas to ask those questions. That's how embedded this stuff is. Wow. So all the money is the most corrupt thing, and you fix the money, all of this kind of fixes itself. I mean, the federal government should not have a Department of Energy at all. Like, what the hell is its business, right? Like, why are they telling us how much energy we can consume? You're essentially restricting all the entrepreneurs that want to try different things. This is why we don't have nuclear powered airplanes or something like that. Like there's all this technology that gets held back as a result of federal policy and regulation and stupidity. And so all of that stems from the money. I've been saying this for a long time. It's you fix the money, you fix a lot of different things, because now you have to have a rational budget in the U.S. Congress instead of let's just spend $3 trillion more than we have. There's no way anybody could do that with a sound money. But they can do that when you control the money printer, the Federal Reserve. So those would be the two that I would say.
Can you elaborate on just the you just mentioned like the sort of energy, I'm blanking on the word, but the Energy Commission?
Department of Energy.
Department of Energy. There we go. Can you guys elaborate on that? I actually don't know anything about it and why it's fucked up and how it influences the way that we use energy in this country.
Well, it was set up in the 70s as a response to the gas crisis, right? Like we had oil prices and stuff like that. Now, a lot of that was because of the emergence of the petrodollar and like the demand for dollars and oil as a result of that. But that's another whole part of the story. But they created a Department of Energy to sort of try to have a unified energy policy. And that's led to disaster, because essentially what they've said is, well, we want you to go green, forget about the economics of everything, forget about the market, forget about what people want, forget about costs or prices or anything like that. We're going to centralize the decisions of energy. And this is where it gets you. And Europe went even further, right? Like with Green Party and in Germany taking control, they shut down basically every nuclear plant and stuff like that. So you get idiotic policies as a result of top-down, centralized, we're going to make all the decisions for you kind of economy that you have in energy. U.S. has been a little bit better, but that's largely because of sort of historical things with oil and stuff like that. New technologies like nuclear and stuff haven't gotten developed since the 70s, largely because of the Department of Energy, right? Like they basically made it harder and harder to build a nuclear power plant, and as a result, now it takes 7 years to set one up, and a lot of it is just checking boxes on some bureaucrat's form. It's this is why we haven't progressed, and you're still using the designs from the 70s, and there's so many other ways in which nuclear could go, but no one lets anybody do anything because the government controls this stuff.
I want to expand a little bit more on the topic of energy because we see the conversation coming out of DC heavily around the amount of energy Bitcoin uses. Proof of work mining just continues to be thrown as sort of this boogeyman of different types of mining. Joe, I'd love your thoughts just on any of the regulatory efforts around proof of work mining goes, both within certain state legislators as well as nationally.
Well, the first part's easy. That the forefront in the battles you're going to fight, I believe, in the next 6 to 12 months, all relate to local policies. They're far more nimble. They don't have to deal with the gridlock in Washington. Given where the political calendar is and the election coming up next month, it's altogether likely, as I alluded to earlier, that we'll have an entirely new Congress. So they're going to revisit things. And I don't really expect much to come of the executive report, particularly the executive report on energy usage among quote unquote crypto and Bitcoin that we talked about last month at length. So I really think that's a non-starter. I don't think anything's going to happen in the lame duck until you get a new Congress sworn in, and they'll probably take it, a totally different approach on that. Hopefully, they deputize someone like Senator Lummis to lead the charge on looking at any energy policy. I would prefer they do nothing, quite honestly, with proof of work mining at the federal level. However, we do know that there are some pretty left of center places like New York and elsewhere where it seems like they're going to be moving rapidly in a continued basis to try and impose additional restrictions on proof of work mining. I think some of those are going to be subjected to legal challenges. So I expect once those laws are in place, folks like myself and others who I've already been in contact with are eager to challenge them in court and the constitutionality of those and other applicable encroachment on federal energy policy. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be localized, in my view, to begin with. Eventually, you may get something out of Washington, but I'm not particularly expecting anything in the near term.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, the election's literally like 2.5 weeks away, 3 weeks away, something like that. And we're expecting at least one of the houses of Congress to be Republican at that point. You're going to have some level of deadlock. That's possible that Joe Biden goes and throws executive orders around all over the place and stuff like that as a way to subvert Congress or something like that. But that's a great way to make sure you don't get elected in 2024. So I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the way that he does things. But you do have some regulatory bodies that are probably going to be tempted to push the envelope a little bit. And who knows, like deadlock periods are when they try to sort of like consolidate their power and things like that. I don't know if that's going to happen necessarily with these regulators, but that is always a possibility because they're unelected officials essentially that get to set policy, which I like. Again, it's fiat rent-seeking bureaucratic craziness that's only enhanced by fiat money, and these people have jobs only because you can print money out of thin air. I agree with Joe that I don't see anything happening, at least in Congress. I think much more prevalent over the next, like soon as Congress changes, stuff like that. Gonna see the Hunter Biden laptop story that's going to take the headlines for like however long. You're gonna see Ukraine energy deals and stuff like that. Maybe something about the war there, and like all that stuff is going to become much more of a scandal because the Republicans are going to have power and they're going to attack the president like any other Congress that's in the opposition party of a president is going to do. So I don't see I see that totally fizzling out. At the earliest, you revisit it in 2024. I don't think any sort of ban is going to really happen, at least through Congress. It's possible a regulatory body tries to do something, but yeah, I like political wins, at least at the moment. I really don't think that's going to happen. It's also possible that somebody cheats somewhere, and then you have a uniparty government that does something before they get kicked out or something. But I really doubt that's going to happen.
So, on the topic of rent seekers, Jimmy, Joe, I wholeheartedly agree with you that we can't just switch over to green energy overnight.
Yeah.
However, it feels to me that the reason we have stopped further development into other energy sources like nuclear, while at the same time like further cementing our places, like we have to use carbon fuels, like that's just the way we designed our systems, is because we have so many lobbyists from these oil companies sort of blocking policies, being these middlemen, and being the rent seekers to say, hey, all these government funds around energy need to go back to carbon energy sources. And if we were to reinvest further and sort of not necessarily deprioritize carbon, but reprioritize other energy sources, do you think that this sort of conversation around energy use is bad could dissipate as a result?
So for my part, what I'm consistently sort of upset about is the fact that globally there have been I don't have the exact number, but I know it's in the trillions. There have been trillions of dollars of incentives that have put towards quote unquote green and renewable energy, right? And given the trillions of dollars of investment in terms of overall energy productions, it still makes up a tiny fraction of global energy production, right? So that tells me that you need to incentivize it organically in the market. You're not going to trigger this through government subsidies alone. What I'm encouraged at is things like Bitcoin, right? Like I think that provides a natural market-based incentive for renewable and green energy, right? That would promote it naturally, because if you can mine and can be profitable based on some renewable source, that's win-win, right? You both provide an economic incentive to develop and expand that support to the grid without taking money from taxpayers to sort of subsidize it, and who knows if that goes to some waste of space, like completely unproductive investment. So I'm all in favor of market-based solutions to incentivize renewable and green energy, and I think that's the way it has to go. I'm not as inclined to support governmental-based investment in green and renewable energy, because I think a lot of that is just a boondoggle. It's just giving money to privileged people who have access.
I really don't think green energy is really that useful. I've said this before. I've written about it, and there's a lot of resources that you can go and read about. But green energy is an altcoin. That's basically what it is. It's all completely subsidized. It's an altcoin. It's an altcoin. It's been subsidized by government in all sorts of ways, and the costs are completely hidden, and they talk about, you could get this many cents per kilowatt hour or whatever, but that energy is not at all steady, right? Like especially wind and solar, it's only available during the times when the sun is out or the wind is blowing. It's a complete like boondoggle. It doesn't make any sense. It makes the grid worse, and you should be putting that money towards other developments like nuclear, for example. The other thing is that oil. I've been reading a lot more about oil recently, and they're not innocent either. In fact, the establishment of the Federal Reserve was largely due to Rockefeller and John D. Rockefeller. He was president of Standard Oil. The Sherman Trust Act dissipated Standard Oil into many different oil companies, among others like Exxon and Mobil, and I forget, Standard of Indiana, I think might have become Sunoco, and there was one from California, which I can't remember about anyone from California, the main gasoline company. Anyway, these were all companies. That was John Rockefeller's thing, and he wanted to make sure that his money, he and his descendants would keep a lot of the power. So the Rockefeller people, along with the Morgan people, essentially designed the Federal Reserve System. You can go read about the creature from Jekyll Island or Rothbard's, history of the Federal Reserve. But both are very good books on the topic of what exactly happened. So oil has had sort of like political control for over like 100 years, and they continue to some degree. And this is why I think nuclear has had such a tough time. It's been under government regulation, a very tight government regulation, since the 30s and 40s, basically, like when it all started. And the thing is, it's got way more potential than any of this other stuff by like orders of magnitude. You can have a single nuclear power plant that does, as much as like a solar panel that goes across like the state of Delaware or something like that. Right? It's you could have like enormous solar grids, and you could have like one small nuclear power plant. And this is using technology from the 70s. If you use like better technology, try to figure out different ways to, capture all of this energy that's there. We'd have way more prosperity. And the thing is, like, the more efficient we are with energy, the more productivity we have per person. The reason why we don't have something like 70% of the workforce in farming is because we have all of these machines that are really, really, really good at doing the labor that used to take thousands and thousands of people. You have a single machine that could reap the harvest of an entire field with just one person, rather than thousands of people. This is why energy is so important for humanity, and the fact that it's been sort of like made to be evil to produce energy, to consume energy, is just how far we've gone from recognizing the benefits that energy actually has. I mean, civilization used to be very difficult and very hard. I mean, imagine like sewing your own clothes. Like before 300 years ago, most people had like three changes of clothes like at any one time, right? Like that was it. And that was for like a relatively well-off person. Most people had one change of clothes because clothes took so much energy to create. Then they came up with like an automatic weaver and automatic spinner and things like that. The word spinster, for example, comes from all these women that would have to spin thread all the time. And a spinster was literally women spinning thread. That was what most people did, right? Like they either worked in agriculture or worked on spinning thread or whatever. And and each piece of clothing would cost what would be the equivalent of like $5,000. It's not the case anymore. You can get a shirt from Banana Republic for $10. And that's what energy gets you. And that's something that politicians, unfortunately, with their fiat like rent-seeking sort of mentality, think that, oh, if I demonize this, I'll get a little more power. And they have this zero-sum mentality towards everything and demonize things that are actually productive for society. And that's where we come. So all of this rant to say is that people have no idea about energy, and their thoughts on energy do not come from first principles. They come from demagoguery, and they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. And they really need to get educated. And I have no problem saying that to the vast majority of the people on the planet that do not understand, how we got to where we got to as a result of the energy production that we have.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. It's such a shame.
When are we announcing, and forgive me, I don't mean to put Jimmy as president and Joe as VP, but like, is there going to be a song, Carlasare 2024 ticket? Like, how do I vote for your policies, Jimmy?
Could not pay me enough money to go something like that, or to make me do. I do not want anything like that ever in my life. You could not pay me. You could give me 21 million Bitcoin, and I would say no.
Holy shit!
Wow.
All right.
All the money in the world,
decided.
You would still say no.
I would say no, because like, what kind of a life is that? I mean, look at
A terrible
these are
one.
all like sociopathic,
Jimmy,
psychopathic people that do this anyway. So
you could take
I'm
the
not
gig
gonna-
like Liz Truss for a couple weeks and get that sweet pension, right?
Hell
I,
yeah.
I also
Just a
have some
couple weeks,
morals, and
right?
I would not like to rent seek, please. I would much rather like make money on my own, enjoy my life. This is why I'm on this trip, right? Like, I'm hanging out with my family in Europe and getting to see the Vatican and La Pietà and the Sistine Chapel and David and all this wonderful stuff. That's way better for me than running the freaking country and having to deal with the deep state and media that hates me. I mean, like, I get enough hate as it is on Twitter. No, thank you.
That's what you would say if you were really in Europe, just to, figure out the situation so that you could take Liz Truss's place. What about you, Joe? Would you run for president?
No, not with the current state of affairs. After a Bitcoin standard, maybe it'll be a different story. But things are too messed up now. I can be more effective in what I do, which is advocate for people in court. So I'd prefer to do it that way. But I really wanted to get into one thing, if that's okay, if I'm not derailing the conversation. Did you all read this actual order regarding the Hodlonaut piece? I don't know if you've gotten through it, but there are some amazing portions of it that, if you haven't, I highly commend you to take a look at. Have you seen this?
Give us the highlights. What are some of the things that they said?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting, they talk about specifically the Civil War, and they bring up BSV, and they bring up Bcash, and they actually even talk about let me pull up the actual order while I'm talking here, but they actually even bring up the version of the where I guess Hodlonaut called Craig Wright insane or out of his mind, and they talk about how, well, clearly if he's claiming to be Satoshi and he has unwilling to show evidence of it, that could be fair and fairly considered as somebody that's insane. But I thought it was interesting how the judge took the time and really did her homework and recognized this for what it is, which is a contested civil war and somebody who's trying to manufacture evidence after the fact to support his position. So let me read one section here from page 4 from the actual order. You'll like this one, P, I think. Okay, if it'll load. Okay, yeah. As mentioned, where is it here? A Bitcoin is built on the principle don't trust, verify, and the core of the system is transparency and verifiability in all transactions. A number of people in the Bitcoin community are therefore skeptical that Wright does not sign with keys that belong to Satoshi Nakamoto or otherwise document that he has or has had control over these keys. Wright has not been willing to do this. He also claims that he now has no opportunity to do so. He has given several explanations for the reasons for this, which the court does not go into further. So that I like that portion. It's clearly the judge showing, that she's understanding the fact that he's been all over the place with his claims of why he can or cannot sign the keys. And she really did her homework. I mean, the whole order is 27 pages. You should take it in. Let me just pull up this part where there's a comment about him being insane, which I think is funny. Let's see. Okay, here. Statements that are defamatory in isolation, and statements are defamatory in isolation, and the statements must be viewed as a whole. There are several different condescending valuations combined with factual claims about Wright's state of health, quote, clearly mental ill, which is in one of the tweets from 2019, and factual claims with accusations of fraud, that he's a sad and pathetic scammer, a fraud himself, together with calls for participation in the passing on Hodlonaut's message. It is significant these statements made on Twitter with the use of a hashtag and therefore suitable to reach a large audience. And then he goes on to say, the court says that given the fact that he appears to be manufacturing some of these evidence and some of these claims, clearly it's not unreasonable for Hodlonaut to describe him as mentally ill, because if that were in fact true, based on the information we have, that would be fairly within, but what would be protected speech under Norway law. So I thought that was interesting. The judge really did her homework on putting this together.
No, she, especially during the covering of the trial, she seemed as though she actually understood Bitcoin, at least to the degree in which you need to understand it to properly determine what the hell is going on between two people who had an argument online, and now that's turning into a legal debacle. It goes to show you just what can get you in trouble depending on how much money one party has and how much time they have. Joe, one thing that we touched on it a little bit during this trial, but there's a degree where, like, we in America have, I think, a little bit more freedoms to discuss openly this trial, and we're protected by the First Amendment right. This isn't necessarily the case all around the world. Can you maybe just touch on sort of why, or how significant and important something like the First Amendment is to protect all of us. And I cannot believe that I'm literally asking you to define the First Amendment, but like that's where we are, because I think we take it for granted. And this is a perfect reminder of that.
It's incredibly important. It is one of the paramount rights that we have. And I would say that, although I'm not an expert in the 200 plus sovereign states in the world and all their different laws, I think that we're near the top in terms of our respect for freedom of expression, based on, just anecdotally what I've seen globally. And that's really important. It's really precious, and it's important not to jeopardize that. And right now you've got censorship not only coming from the government side, but you increasingly have censorship from our digital overlords that control centralized platforms like Twitter and Facebook and social media. So for my part, I think it's so important. And this, I actually, this goes back to Bitcoin. Why it's so critical is because, at its core, freedom over how to control your finances, freedom over your money is essential. And it's an underpinning of, I think, freedom of expression in general, because I think David Chaum talked about this, that you may have to pay in a society for information, and if censorship of transactions can be conducted, you can't get the information you need to have informed beliefs. So that's really, I think, what is core of Bitcoin, why Bitcoin is so important. Bitcoin is a reinforcing tool, from my perspective, to promote and safeguard freedom of expression. And yes, it's all great to have the court system, and don't believe me, I'm a big believer in a court system. I'm not cynical of it. I know that people, in the Bitcoin community generally hate lawyers. I'll just tell you that I do believe that the long arc of the United States court system does bend towards justice. There can be miscarriages of justice along the way, but I do believe we can move towards and have a better system if you fight for it in court. And for my part, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, these sorts of core tenets of a democratic, civilized republic like we have, I think those are going to have to be fought over, and we're going to have to fight vigorously over the next decades to protect them. And Bitcoin's going to be right in the center of that. Bitcoin is going to be at its core a safeguard that's extra legal, extra contractual, extra beyond the standard system to safeguard those rights. So that's my view.
Jimmy,
I don't quite hold the faith in the legal system that you do. I still
know you
see
don't.
it as
Even
I still see it as whoever has the money gets to win. What?
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically an oligarchic system in the courts, where you have completely baseless claims like Craig Wright being able to harass people as a result of having a rich backer like Calvin Ayre, and he gets to continue to do this in large part because he has money, and
not in the U.S.
Bring all sorts of,
not in the U.S.
I mean,
the suits would never fly in the U.S.
I'm sure if he could figure out a way to do it, he would do it, and it's not like he hasn't done anything in the U.S. He had that BS copyright claim or something like that to the white paper that he registered in the U.S. and it was like, oh, now I can sue people for copyright or whatever. Thing is, like, you have some evil people that can take advantage of this system, surely, because there are just so many holes in it. And I've become more a fan of English common law and figuring out Stefan Kinsella talks a lot about this, about how decentralized law is a lot harder to overturn than centralized law. So instead of a legislative body deciding on its laws, if you have judges case by case figuring out, hey, this is more in line with natural law, or this is what's just, then you get sort of like a body of law that becomes more and more just over time. And it does sort of like have that arc that you were talking about, where you bend towards justice instead of ridiculous entitlements that Congress just sort of makes up out of thin air or whatever. That to me is horribly unjust, and the miscarriages of justice at the legislative level, at the executive level, those are way worse in many ways than whatever single trials that end up happening. So I don't know.
We still have a common law system here. We still have a common law system. Right.
To some degree, I just find it horribly unjust in many ways, because it's been used against the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world, and they're the ones that have trouble getting justice. If you're, Deshaun Watson, you're going to be able to defend yourself from almost anything, right? Like, I mean, he has how many people accusing him of sexually inappropriate things or whatever?
Yeah.
He can defend himself because he's got $250 million, right? Like, but if you're poor and you do the same thing, you're gonna probably go away or be bankrupt or all kinds of evil is gonna happen to you. So in a sense, the system is not just because it favors those that have money over those that don't, and I find that pretty terrible still.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hold myself back because Jimmy, there's a degree of truth, but I do want to highlight, like, I think there is some degree of optimism to be had, given the fact that Hodlonaut doesn't have the backing of Calvin and doesn't have as deep of pockets, and in turn was able to see, or at least have the judgment read by someone who at least was going to think about this holistically, maybe through natural law, maybe through common sense. Who knows?
That wasn't natural law. That was a bunch of Bitcoiners, and he had the benefit of capturing some of the attention economy. There are tons of people that suffer miscarriages of justice that don't have any money and don't have any attention. If you have one of those two things, then you can get some level of justice. If you're a very poor person, but if it's on the news every night, you're going to get some justice for whatever it is that happened to you. But if you're somebody that's poor and can't get any attention, Hodlonaut got a lot of attention, right? There was tons of people donating to him and stuff because they saw the miscarriage of justice as it was. But there's a lot of people that don't get that, and they suffer every day. And there's rich people getting away with a lot of stuff, and that's just sort of how the justice system works at this point.
There's definitely truth to what you're saying, Jimmy, and there are miscarriages of justice. I will say that I know personally, and many lawyers that I speak with, there's thousands of people you've never heard that have gotten free legal representation that's top notch. I think in my records last year, for no money, we took. I personally billed like 300, 400 pro bono hours where I didn't take a dime and gave them top-notch representations, and people, including people in the Bitcoin community that you've never heard of, that I pursued cases on behalf of. So yes, there's absolutely miscarriage of justice, but in designing a system that's controlled by human beings that are inherently flawed, there's always going to be those situations. And tell me a better system than the one we have. I'd love to see it, because ultimately, I don't think one has been created or designed yet.
Joe, I know we're coming up on the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of your time as well as yours, Jimmy, and give you each the opportunity to say some final words or thoughts to our audience.
Sure, I'll go first. First of all, thank you, Q and P and Jimmy, also for coming on here. I see someone's commented my suit. I actually have to get to a court proceeding. That's why I'm wearing a monkey suit. But no, I really appreciate it. This is great. I think, my main takeaway is we're really in exciting times. And what I think when I look at, whether it's the economic news, the political scene, or where Bitcoin fits in it, every day I wake up and I try to see, not necessarily with certainty where we're moving from here, what comes next, but I just note the sort of push and pull between what is the efforts of central planners to sort of delay the inevitable. And it's fascinating to me that despite all the efforts to do that, to delay the inevitable, I think it's kind of amazing how, the walls of reality seem to be closing in on every single day. And it's kind of nice, right? It's kind of nice that you figure out that you're reaching a point where you can't delay the inevitable any further, whether it's from a monetary standpoint, whether it's from these fiscal deficits, whether it's from the energy shortage that's globally, whether it's from the geopolitical instability. You're reaching sort of a tipping point, and what comes next, we don't know. But I do know that I want to be as passionate and as supportive I can of Bitcoin, both personally, professionally, and speaking out in the community, because I do believe that it is, the lifeboat so many people refer to it as. And from my standpoint, stay tuned and stay plugged in, because I think we're blessed to live in interesting times. So with that, thank you, Jimmy and P and Q. I really enjoy coming on here, and thanks to everybody that tunes in and listens.
All right, my final word. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to me. I think it was like 4 years ago, and there was a guy that wrote me almost every every week. I think he wrote me an email every week, and the topic was he was claiming to be Satoshi. And I responded to the first one, sign with the Genesis key or GTFO. And he took that, I guess, as meaning like he had the right to continuously email me and harass me and tell me that he's Satoshi and why don't I believe he's Satoshi or whatever. This is the kind of insanity that we're dealing with Craig Wright, and I find it crazy that he's able to get as far as he did. And believe it or not, there still are BSV people, and they believe him to some degree and think that whatever he's doing is right. I personally think most of those people are mentally ill in some way. And I really kind of hope that they get better, because honestly, it's one of the saddest things to see people that are so taken in by this extraordinary con man, which, to be honest, it isn't that extraordinary, because I feel like almost any other con man would do a better job than this one. But somehow he's made a name for himself. So. That's the one thing I wanted to comment on. Also, the fiat system seems to be falling apart at the very seams. I don't have really any sort of feelings about it, other than that it's nice for me as I travel because everything is cheap as an American here in Italy, for example. But yeah, I think we're going to see some stuff happen. And, what a time to be alive. What can I say?
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Joe, for joining us. Thank you to our audience, but we are not done yet. Stick around through this commercial break, and we're going to have our news and notes segment. As a reminder, before I let you all go, tickets to Bitcoin 2023 are available. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off of your tickets, as well as anything your heart desires in the Bitcoin Magazine store, including a subscription to the print magazine. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. We will be back with news and notes after this commercial break.
We're back.
Oh,
Live.
hey, we're back. No, we're getting two. Sorry, guys. It's nice to see you two. Only an hour and a half. It only took an hour and a half into the episode for us three to all be on camera together.
We did it. We made it. So much stuff. So much going on today.
I mean, look, I brought it up when we started our segment with Jimmy and Joe, how last night at the end of Bitcoin Magazine Live, we genuinely were talking about how, it's going to be a slow news day, not a whole lot going down. I caught up on some sleep. I caught up on a lot of reading. And then I wake up to just chaos and pandemonium. And I'm not even talking about the first 90 minutes of today's episode. Should let's finish up on the UK stuff, and then let's talk the rest of the news and notes, because I think the biggest story of all will be our last story. Yeah, I did that. I'm making you have to sit through all of our news and notes just so you hear the biggest, most important story. But just to rehash this, Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of the UK, after 45 days, has decided to step down some policies that she introduced during her 45 days as the shortest prime minister in all of the history of, that country, England, that may or may not have been around for like ever at this point. Policy decisions include a tax cut for the rich that sent the pound crashing to near dollar parity, to near dollar parity. You also had a reintroduction of quantitative easing with the call to pension holders that, hey, we need to increase liquidity in the British gilt, i.e. bond markets, a reinvigoration to quantitative tightening when they said, hey, you only have 3 days to figure this out. And then, of course, a reintroduction of quantitative easing because the UK bonds ended up going above 5%. And then, of course, we can't have too much quantitative easing because of inflation. So they're back to quantitative tightening. At this point, I've lost track. So has Liz, as she has now stepped down. And of course, the big takeaway, I think, is the fact that after just 45 days of nearly destroying her country, she now walks away with an annual salary of £115 a year. All a day's worth of work. Am I right, Sean?
Fuck these people. What is happening? Also, I'm wearing an infinity pillow. Yes, I got it in the mail. Somebody sent it to me. I did not ask for it, but it's fucking incredible. It's so comfortable.
So wait,
Wait, did
someone
one
just
of our
sent you-
listeners sent you that?
no, that'd be incredible. Nobody knows my address.
I need to unpack the fact that you just opened a box that you did not expect.
I do what I want.
I feel
I'm a
like
risk
honestly,
taker.
I mean, good luck to you, man.
It's really cold in my house right now, to be clear, which is why I'm wearing I'm wearing the hat. I've got, the whole thing. I'm growing my beard out. I look like an insane person. But I want to focus on
What's colder, your house or the UK or Germany right now?
Oh, Germany for sure.
Dude,
I mean,
no,
when you guys were in
Amsterdam's
PA,
freezing.
I thought it was so funny that you guys were literally like dying on the news desk. I was looking at you, Q, because I know your body
So
language by
cold.
now. You were so cold. People couldn't tell, but you were like literally your teeth were chattering. And apparently it was because there are fucking, there's like heating regulations. Like people come around with fucking thermometers and they're like, your building is too hot, time to die. And they pull out their little sabers and they cut you in half. That's how it works there, right?
Yeah, there were actually 2 of them that showed up. At one point, he said it was too hot, so he just like went ahead and cut the thermostat. It was like, you're on your own now for the rest of the day. We'll fix this tomorrow. It was crazy. I've never seen a sword like that.
It's incredible. But yeah, all joking aside, this is insane. And it is, Jimmy was talking about he loves to talk about the fiat world we live in and how the incentives work. And, we spend a lot of time talking about kind of the incentives that drive us towards this political system that we find ourselves in right now. I understand that in the United States, it's the same thing, that basically if you're a president of the United States, you also get a salary for the rest of your life. But to only have this job for 45 days and to do such a piss poor job that you're like, I have to abstain now, I must step back, and then still get paid. Like, what the fuck? It's infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. And she's going to be fine. She's going to get a job at some like great company. They're going to be like, hey, that incredible experience you have, the understandings that you have from being prime minister for 45 days, absolutely, worth.
She'll get the job as like crypto regulation for Barclays Bank in England or something like
Yes,
that. Like,
Exactly.
I want to share a short list of things that lasted longer than Liz Truss as prime minister.
hit us with it, Q.
Hit it.
Kim Kardashian's marriage to Chris Humphries, the NBA player, lasted 72 days. Most hard cheeses actually have a shelf life of longer than 45 days. Now, this is for who do not get this, however, kind of backstory. Do you like the hard cheese one?
I don't know why, but that it kills
That
me.
was good.
If you liked hard cheese, you are about to become the #1 fan of the Daily Star. Now, the Daily Star is a British publication, and when Liz Truss was announced as the winner, they put out a thing saying, what is going to last longer? Liz Truss as prime minister or wet lettuce? And ladies and gentlemen, the wet lettuce has won.
There is one thing that she did beat. I'm teeing you up.
I will get to that one because this is last but not least, this is my favorite one. Every single Love Island finalist couple from the most recent season had a relationship longer than 45 days. So TV show, romantic dating show, Love Island lasted longer, like the contestants lasted longer than Liz Truss as prime minister. But to Chris's point, Liz Truss, in his own words, lasted 4.1 Scaramucci's.
That's awesome. That's hilarious.
Fuck, I didn't have
Chris,
that soundboard ready.
Any other thoughts on Liz Truss in the UK It's still not called soccer. I know you and I were waiting for that. I have the tweet ready to dunk on McCormick the second the pound is less than $1. But until then, it's too early.
No, I got nothing else here. I think it's pretty asinine that she gets 115K for the rest of her life. It's not just like, a set number of years. It's like until she passes away, she gets $115,000 a year for the rest of her life.
Well, it's for every second you serve as prime minister, you get it. That's how it works. That's the only logical reason there.
But let's keep going. We got so much to cover today. Our next story. Our next story is the UK Treasury has transferred 11 billion pounds to the Bank of England to cover quantitative easing losses. They are set to transfer, as I said, more than 11 billion pounds, $12.4 billion to the Bank of England this fiscal year to cover projected losses in their bond buying program, according to a person familiar with the situation. Q, I feel like you have a much better understanding of the bond markets and what the implications of this are. Take us through it. I
mean, essentially, we're getting a sign that the quantitative easing is going to be done for losses. What that essentially means is that the value of these bonds when they were purchased by the Bank of England are unfortunately worth less than what they are today. However, the market still needs liquidity. So in a weird way, this is actually good because we have seen historical examples and precedent say, well, the bank paid this much for this asset, so we're gonna pay it back in full. We're not actually seeing that. They're gonna get a market value for it, or at least that's how I'm interpreting this. And so, I'm not justifying quantitative easing. This is a stupid decision by both the Bank of England and the Treasury Department. But it is at least not going I don't even want to say it like that because they're injecting liquidity into the market that doesn't want it, that doesn't have it because there are no actual real buyers. So the UK just has to come in and buy these things, but they have to buy them at a loss because otherwise they're just going to buy it from themselves to then further, your two options are either make the Bank of England actually recognize these losses, or you see the Treasury feel these losses. And if the Treasury feels these losses, that's harder inflation. Because if you're essentially paying $1 for something that's known to be worth 50 cents, and then the second you get it, it is worth 50 cents, you just paid $1 to spend 50 cents. But you still have that net effect of spending that $1. It's a really weird formula for inflation, but trust me, I'm not that high anymore. The Amsterdam weed is finally worn off, and there is a connection between buying distressed assets at a discount that further exacerbates inflation.
I'm just seeing a foie gras goose. So when they make foie gras, they have the goose, and then unfortunately it's fairly inhumane. They just have a grain hose that they put into its mouth, and it just and it gets a morbidly obese goose. That's what I'm imagining when you say that they don't want to buy the bonds, but they have to. It's a foie gras goose. Is that a fair summary?
Honestly, yeah.
Bam, I nailed it.
Yeah. So to the goose goes the spoils, I guess.
That's not a saying, but let's keep going. Chris, take us away.
Talking about distressed assets. So another distressed asset right now is Bitcoin miners. So publicly traded miners are obviously, their debts are coming due. A lot of them loaded up in debt in 2020 and 2021 while the money printers were going burr. With that being said, they are now trying to raise capital to pay back those debts. They're doing it in probably the least attractive option. They are selling equity in their company. So the founders or stakeholders or shareholders are getting their shares diluted, and they're selling them to hedge funds, market makers, whoever they can to buy up parts of their company. Obviously, you normally have less control when you do this, but they have to pay their debts. Otherwise, they go out of business. So, interest rates are going up. Borrowing is getting more expensive, and they're just trying to sell pieces of their company in order to pay their debts and keep their operations running. What are your thoughts, guys?
I mean, we've talked about the Bitcoin mining space. I think ultimately this is the best way I'm interpreting news out of the mining space. If it's net neutral or positive, we're going to see just a net neutral effect. But if it's going to be something negative, like some sort of regulatory effort that says no new miners can be set up in New York, not to pick on the state that literally passed that type of legislation, but here we are. that will have a negative effect both on hash rate growth as well as just total network capacity. And I do believe that it's just a lot of this has to do with where the market is being in a bear market. Like, good news isn't going to propel us higher, but bad news will crater us down for the time being.
I agree with that. Let's keep on going.
Money printer keeps going, but this time it's in Japan. The Bank of Japan announces emergency bond buying operation. So this on the heels of the UK, this on the heels of France announcing that they're going to re-explore this. This on the heels of, as we discussed with Joe and Jimmy, the UN calling on rate hikes to be slowed down. You have the IMF and ECB calling upon all central banks to work together on quantitative easing. I mean, I wonder if Jerome Powell is sitting there like drinking a milkshake and be like, yeah, drink my milkshake. Yeah. Like, some of these decisions almost feel like they're like rooting for the demise of all. Jerome
really
Powell's a weird man. You think Jerome Powell's normal?
I don't know, man, but that felt weird. It felt weird. I feel like you were secretly, maybe pleasuring yourself at the table as you said that. I'm just saying. This is a show for kids.
All right, I will say it again, but Jerome Powell sitting there drinking his milkshake, going, yeah, drink my milkshake. Japan, yeah, drink my milkshake. UK, that's right. Get wrecked by my dollar milkshake. Yeah. Like, that's what I think is going on here secretly. Like, maybe not as maliciously as I'm trying to present it or make it out, but
I hope he didn't say it with that tonation either.
He's sort of squinting. He's got a little eyes wide shut mask on, like, drink my milkshake.
Yeah, Japan, drink my milkshake. Yeah.
No.
I mean,
not. I'm curious though, all joking aside, I'm curious how these interactions happen between these various central banks. I have no idea. And to be honest, I've never really thought about it too much, but I wonder the kind of signaling that happens. I wonder how the sort of agreements happen. I wonder if, to your point, Jerome Powell basically just gets to, slap it down on the table and say, like, this is what's happening, deal with it. Do you have any sense for how these entities communicate, Q?
I wish.
I mean, they meet up. Jerome Powell said this a couple months ago. He said that they meet in normally Switzerland with central banks around the world, and they try and like geopolitically plan out around a desk. Like, they play their game of Stratego or whatever, trying to figure out what we're going to do and try and, do their own policies, basically. Obviously, policies can be in conflict with one another, but yeah, I think they talk it out like every couple months.
I don't think they talk as much as like we want to believe they do. Like, there's so many different incentives like in the works. And I think I love citing this because it is a really easy way to like understand how central banks in particular manipulate the global financial system. And it's Preston's interview on McCormick's podcast where he explains the two monopoly boards. And he's like, if the money from one monopoly board starts to get printed and everything is bought, then these players go to the second monopoly board until these players start to finally realize, hey, why are there so many Chinese people buying these houses in my parents' neighborhood? Why are there so many Americans going to Portugal, going all over Europe, buying up houses in Europe? Like, there is a very clear, like, by the time we realize it, that central bank has already done it. So, like,
That's a wonderful analogy.
Like, how much are you going to like, Chris?
Metaphor.
I'm gonna bring it to fantasy football, so I've just lost like 90% of our audience. But like you and I are playing one another, and like we're just talking about football. Realistically, dude, I would never say a word about, oh, this player's injured. Oh, like, I'm actually going to pick up this guy. Like, I think this is like my sleeper defense or what. Like, I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, no, you would just lie and tell me players that you wouldn't actually be doing and to get me to pick up those people.
Wait.
See, that's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, like, we need high level for,
all right,
for
fine. I'll change it to chess. Like, if we're
no, but just like give me the summary. Like, what is the thing that you're trying to signal? What is the thing that you're trying to obfuscate?
The point I'm trying to make is, like, if we're actually in competition with one another, I'm not going to show you my playbook. I might tell you I'm going to run this one play, and that might be honest. And then the 18 other things I tell you I'm going to do, they're maybe on a whiteboard on the maybe pile, or they've already started to get crossed out. Meanwhile, like what I actually intend on doing, like I'm not going to tell who I'm competing against, because while we don't think these banks compete against one another, like fiat currencies do compete against one
They
another.
absolutely do.
And so as a result, we shouldn't think all these central bankers are in cahoots with one another. They're in fact competing against one another. But as a result, we are the ones who deal with the catastrophes when these currencies implode, when their financial policy doesn't work out, when inflation starts to run rampant, or they don't have enough energy to keep their country warm.
Yep, I agree.
But at the same time, like, what do I fucking know? I live in my mother's basement.
All we
That's the
know
most
is that
tortured
Q
analogy ever. Metaphor.
Q does
whenever
not
is
have the
similar.
money printer, is what he's telling you.
Yeah,
He's not gaming out.
Let's
Like
keep going.
Chris, the Chapwood Index.
So it's back, baby. What do I mean by that? The Chapwood Index is back. Their website was mysteriously down since like April of this year. So the Chapwood Index is a historic index that has tried to use a basket of different things. I believe it was like 75 different items, and they tried to track them over time without changing them. So they would include things like a car, and they wouldn't adjust it for hedonic adjustments like the CPI does, which is basically saying, oh, well, you have XM radio, which they didn't have back in the 1950s. So we can make the car cost come down lower because you didn't have that. So basically, they're just like trying to subtract the inflation from additions. So new features and components of added cars, they subtract out. But anyway, they tried to keep it a basis of car, a pound of meat, all these different things without adjusting them, like the CPI, which is the government printed number, of trying to change it. The Chapwood Index, last time I checked before it went down, was showing that we were seeing inflation somewhere between around 14%, which a lot of people, especially economists or Bitcoiners, I should say, were saying that that's probably closer to what true inflation is. Obviously, inflation is different for every person. If you're not in the market for a house and you only rent, you don't have to worry about the price of housing market. If you're buying the S&P 500 index, that might be your inflation rate. If you're buying Bitcoin, various different things. It's depending on what's in your basket of goods. If you're like Q and you live in your mother's basement and all you have to worry about is pizza, and you're good. You just have to worry about the inflation rate of pizza.
Dude, I'm telling you, the inflation rate of pizza is way more than 10%, though.
No. We added pepperonis. That's a hedonic adjustment. We bring that price down. You're good. You're flat. It doesn't cost any more.
Look, why do you need pepperoni? You can just use meat substitute, bro. Get those crickets, grind them up. Just put the little earmuffs in for the little screams. Put them on the pizza.
Will never eat. Did you guys know I actually had dinner with P like in person one time when I was in Nashville, and he looked me dead in the eyes when my dinner was crawling a little bit and said, no, it's edible. It's delicious for you. And I've never been in the same room as him again since.
That is a lie. But what actually did happen is I ate a hamburger in front of Chris. And my view is like, I need to, per unit time, I need to get as many calories into my body as humanly possible, in the shortest period of time possible. Because I got shit to do. I got places to be. I got conversations to have. So I basically inhaled a hamburger, and later Chris was like, man, that was disgusting. There was hamburger juice everywhere. It was just insane. So, my friends, if you see me in person sometime,
Chris and I are just never going to have sit-down meals with you.
You don't have a choice. It's happening. The Chapwood Index is amazing. If you have not reviewed it, it was one of the, everybody comes to Bitcoin for a different reason or from a different angle. For me, that angle was inflation. It was the experience that I had entering the job market during 2008, experiencing the great financial crisis, seeing these banks being bailed out and being like, what the fuck is happening? And so for me, things that talk about inflation and target inflation and try to explain what's actually happening in the world, separate from the official narrative, really strike a vibrant chord. And, shadowstats.org, which you've heard me talk about before, which takes the CPI metric changes each year. For some of the adjustments are reasonable. Most of them are not, because the CPI is a manufactured metric that is designed to support the goals of the U.S. government. So shadowstats.org basically takes the original definition of the CPI and then compares it to the current definition and allows you to see the disconnect. And the other one, the more significant one in my mind, is the Chapwood Index. So if you have not heard of or looked through the Chapwood Index. I think is it chapwoodindex.org, Chris? Is that right? Chapwoodindex.com?
That's correct. Yep, I posted it in the chat as well. Or
Amazing.
actually, chapwood.com, my bad.
Chapwood.com?
Yes.
Okay. Chapwood.com. Go check it out. It is an alternative to the CPI, as Chris said. It's a very, very illustrative thing, and it has all the top cities in the United States. And it's really interesting to go through and look and compare that to the official CPI numbers. Let's keep going, though. The next story is mine.
Yes.
Don't even try, Q. Don't try to take my story. Gary Gensler pushing out his team. The SEC leaders with nearly 50 years experience have quit under Gensler's tenure. 3 senior SEC officials, together having nearly 50 years of collective experience at the agency, have quit under his leadership. Why is this happening? What is going on? I turn the question to the two of you. What are the justifications for these actions?
I mean, I kind of feel like
You don't know the answer. I'll tell you.
I don't like. I also I clicked the article and now I'm getting like all by myself like in the background because I click Fox. So it's tough because I don't follow Gary Gensler as closely as I should. I think truthfully when he brings up Bitcoin or even just cryptocurrencies, that's when he's on my radar. This could boil down to so many different things.
P, I want to hear your thoughts. I just think he's a poor leader, or people are getting frustrated with his like ruling by authority, but I could be wrong. What are your thoughts?
Yep. That is my take as well. Specifically, Christina Littman, who is the head of crypto assets and cyber unit, Jennifer Leet, who's the associate director of the Division of Enforcement, and Adam Adderton, who is the co-chief of the Division of Enforcement's Asset Management Unit, have all resigned. His style of leadership is pretty unique. People are also unhappy with his strong opinions about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space, and people are also apparently upset about his, quote, expansive agenda. People want him to stay in his lane. He's not doing so, and they're unhappy about it, and they feel exposed. But
I wonder also if there's a degree of like, because Papa Gensler is such a proponent of Bitcoin, if this is a move to try to undermine sort of his authority, given he won't go after proof of work mining, and maybe that isn't the priority of most people in DC.
I'm not actually sure, but
like that. The only reason I want to throw that is like, that's just as likely as him just being a dick and people not wanting to work for him.
Well, I think people don't actually care if someone's a dick. I think they care about it if they view it as being a sort of, political professional risk to themselves. And I think people are viewing Gary Gensler as that because he is pro Bitcoin, and we're entering into this new situation. We talk about this a lot, but in previous bear markets, everyone was like, Bitcoin is a scam. You see, it's gone down. And now we're in this world where it's undeniable. Even as the price is as low as it is, people are still adopting it. Companies are talking about it. Companies are introducing policies around it. Gensler is still talking about it. And so I think, these people are uncomfortable with the direction he's taking it, or they view his decisive actions as being, creating political and professional risk for themselves. So it seems like more fiat nonsense. I'm kind of, broadly in support of Gensler, but it'll be interesting to see what happens as we go forward.
Chris, tell us, it is now time for the big main story. This is what you've all been waiting for. This is the big one. Stay in your seats because you're about to jump out of it.
Yeah, so this is actually a very serious story. The IRS needs something to do. What do I mean by that? The IRS has a draft form 1040 that currently came out this Monday for tax year for 2022. So this year, that will change to digital asset reporting. You must check yes or no, and it cannot be left blank. So this is something they want all tax-abiding, citizens of the United States that file their taxes with the IRS filling out. If you check yes, or you must check yes, if you received a digital asset as payment for property or services, you received an award or reward as a digital asset, you received a digital asset as a result of mining, staking, or similar activities. So miners would therefore have to report that they are mining and any income that they receive for Bitcoin. You received a digital asset as a result of a hard fork, digital asset for property or services. You dispose of an asset for property or services. You dispose of an asset in exchange or trade for another digital asset. You transfer the digital asset for free for a bona fide gift. So if I were to send 5 sats to Q would then have to report receiving those sats. Otherwise, dispose of any financial asset in the interest of a digital asset. And then there's things that you don't need to require to check yes for. So if you currently hold it in a wallet, so if you're holding Bitcoin in your own wallet, you don't have to report that. If you're transferring your asset or whatever digital asset to another wallet or another account that you hold, so if you're transferring it from wallet to wallet or address to address that you possess, or from your account to another, like whatever account that you use to buy Bitcoin, or if you purchase digital assets using USD or other real currencies through the use of electronic platforms such as PayPal, Venmo, or any other exchange. So this has huge sweeping implications. So obviously miners would have to dox themselves if they want to stay in compliance with the law. If you received a gift, if you're using a platform like Fold, Strike, or Earn Carrot, you might have to report that as income. Like this is like a dragnet surveillance of they want to track basically everything aside from stuff you already hold, stuff you're moving from your wallet to your wallet, or if you're just buying it. But a lot of times when you're buying it, you have to go through a KYC service unless you're using a non-KYC platform. I know that's a lot to throw at you guys. What are your thoughts to this, just hearing this off the bat?
So I think we should also bring up, this is a draft. This is not yet sort of instilled into law. To me, the way I'm kind of at least digesting this for the time being is this reads very similar to sort of that PayPal policy where there is now no doubt that there is a conversation happening behind closed doors that the IRS wants to have information on who is holding, not just who is buying and selling, but who is holding. And in turn, whether they intentionally let this roll out, whether they intend to have this become law, or whether this was a mistake, a leak, or whatever, there's now no doubt in my mind, at least, that this is a conversation happening. And I think that's the scary part here. More so because it doesn't just stop here. P puts it so eloquently when he says things like, there's nothing as temporary as a temporary solution, or what's that saying that you say?
Temporary government mandate.
That's the one. So like all it starts as is, just let us know if you got like a lolly reward, or if you used Earn Carrot and you got some sats because you read an article through Bitcoin Magazine, or if you got sats by watching this live stream. It now will then turn into, okay, but where are you storing it? How are you storing it? Okay, let us store for it. Like it can just spiral into all of these bigger things.
I mean, it's going to get to the point where they're going to say, oh, you're holding it on your own wallet, but you've never reported this in the past. Now you need to tell us that you did it if you bought it with non-K. Like it just gets more and more succinct. I think that they're going to try and go after merchants next. So like, oh, like you don't have to report it if you have it, but if you go to spend it at a grocery store, like Bitcoin or whatever digital asset, they're going to say, we need to see your ID and you need to mark that down or scan your, like, I can definitely see it going down that route pretty easily, which is not a good thing. P, what are your thoughts? You seem very pensive.
So we talked about this a lot before the show. I do not yet know enough about this, like how imminent this is, how close this is, as Q was saying, what the actual next steps that need to happen, where the opportunities for people to be like, this is fucking bullshit are. But as Q pointed out, this is a step in a direction that we need to vehemently fight against. This, even if the argument becomes, well, this doesn't even really matter that much, or even if they soften it slightly, the problem with these types of law is the wrong word, but these types of policies is the chilling effect that they create on the space. So this creates a massive, if this were to go into effect, this would create a massive regulatory burden on businesses and on individuals, right? We were talking about earlier, but like if you're running a Lightning node, you're totally fucked in this type of situation, because suddenly you are expected, or you are being required to track the vast majority, if not all, of the routing payments you get as payments are going through you. And if you're running a moderately sized Lightning node, you might be getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of payments that are routed through you every single day. And so even if it's like they're only going to go after a tiny portion of people, these kinds of things are put in place to slow the growth of these systems that these fuckers view as being threatening to them. So this does not surprise me at all. I think we're going to have to fight these fights, whether it's on this specific issue or whether this gets slapped down and there's additional ones. We're constantly going to have to be vigilant around these types of things, because again, the question should not be like, is somebody actually going to get, prosecuted or fined or whatever under this? It's, what effect is this going to have on the average person? How much will this prevent people from being interested in exploring these possibilities and exploring these new technologies, because it increases the risk even slightly? And that's fucked up.
Yeah, and I think it also pushes innovation outside the country. I mean, there's a famous thing called the Ireland rule. Apple actually made this famous by like incorporating Apple, like Apple Inc., like the Apple, in Ireland. And it's a loophole where Ireland doesn't charge you income tax if you're an international business, but then they also don't have to pay US tax, like federal income tax, because they're technically trying to incentivize international businesses. Like, I don't know, there's just basically a loophole where they don't have to pay tax in Ireland or the US. And so imagine, like, it's like, what are people in the US going to do? Am I just going to send a $300 laptop to like the Cayman Islands and have them set up and tell this random kid like, hey, as long as you're routing these payments through, I'll give you half of whatever I set up. And like, I'm not receiving the funds here, but it's technically a business that I own in the Cayman Islands. Like, I think it hampers innovation in the United States. And to P&Q's point, I mean, this is just a draft right now. Obviously, with the wording of 2022, they want to push this through before December 31st of this year, which is coming up. But I think Congress and Senate are going to have to weigh on this, and before it gets approved, that the IRS can go forward with this. But we obviously know that they were trying to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. This is something that they're going to want to do over the next coming years and go after people that are misreporting or not reporting, or they want to give them something to do, and they want to earn their sats with regulatory capture, basically.
I mean, I'm genuinely curious if either of you, how do I phrase this without sounding like a Fed, but like genuinely, like, are you concerned about how far the government could take a policy like this? And how would you react if this was to be passed into law for 2022 taxes?
I'll go first here, if you don't mind, P. I think this is an issue. I think the government's traditionally slow. So like, even if we don't see the repercussions next year or the following year, like in 5 years' time, all of a sudden they're like, hey, remember that thing we passed 5 years ago? And, people kind of underreported, or we felt like they didn't report. And then they just kind of dragnet. They go like, hey, if you didn't report, you're going to jail. Otherwise, if you cough up what you know, and then you're scrambling of like, oh, it's been 5 years. I don't know what I did and didn't report. Was I underreporting? Oh, like I was running a Lightning node those whole 5 years and I was routing payments through. Like, what does that mean? Am I implicated for that? Like, it's kind of one of those things that's like they have a law in the back of their pocket that they can always use to go after you with. So I don't think it's a good thing. I think the government's traditionally slow, so it's going to be a few years before we see the effects of it, but it might be already too late then.
Yeah, I think I would just say as a blanket rule, like, pay your fucking taxes. There's a reason that Al Capone, he murdered tens and tens of people, and the thing that they got him on was fucking tax evasion or tax fraud, whatever it was. Do not put yourself in a position as a Bitcoiner where you are at risk for being, brought in or, affected by these types of things. So we need to fight these types of systems as they are being suggested, proposed, things like that. But once you're in that hole, you got to just deal with it.
This gets very interesting. So I know that there's like utilities like or the Open Dime. Like, let's just say I load a UTXO onto an Open Dime and I hand that to Q or you. Like, technically that address hasn't moved, but technically ownership has changed. So imagine people are just like, obviously you need to verify, someone need to plug into their computer like, oh, this has got 1 million sats or whatever the amount is. But imagine like you're like passing money around by never like transferring it off. You know what I mean? So like,
there's an argument to be made. there's like, what is it, like state chains, and then potentially, like, depending on how it's implemented, like you could say the same thing about like Fedi and Federated Chamian Mints, maybe even like, Taro.
There's a thing called offline cash, which is basically the same thing as an open dime, but you upload like a physical paper note with Bitcoin, and when you transfer it to someone, they can sweep the funds. But yeah, it's very interesting.
So that's part of the problem here, right? Is that when you have these overreaching, again, I'm using these terms very loosely, but let's say the right term is regulation, policy, whatever it is. Again, it's this chilling effect, right? Everybody has to worry about these types of things going forward, and they're often ambiguous, they're often poorly implemented, and again, they are designed very explicitly to have this effect. They're not actually after the money or the possible money that they could be collecting. It's about, pouring molasses on innovation and development in these areas because they're afraid of what they don't understand.
Yep.
My friends, I believe we've reached the end of our show. I want to remind everybody, if you have not already, use code BMLive and purchase yourself a Bitcoin 2023 ticket. It is the largest Bitcoin conference in the world. Bitcoin 2022 was absolutely incredible, and you do not want to miss it. We also have the print edition of the magazine, which is a collector's item. Right now, we are on the censorship-resistant issue. We are about to release the Orange Party issue. I would highly suggest, if you have not picked one up, do so. The paper is thick. It feels weighty. It is a significant object, and the writing in it is fantastic. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Until then, stay frosty.